In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate the concept of if statement in Python language. Now, we have been working with if statement off and on in various lessons in the past, but here I'm going to strictly focus on the if statement itself and different variations of the if statement as well. So in order to write useful programs, we almost always need the ability to check conditions and change the behavior of the program accordingly. These conditional statements give us the ability, and the simplest form of this conditional statement is the if statement. Think of this as a simple logic. If it's raining outside, I would need an umbrella. If I'm hungry, I would need some food, and so on. And of course, we can build upon the if statement as well, such as if I'm hungry, I need some food. Otherwise, else, I'll stay hungry, or something like that, right? So the concept of the logic is if, then, else. And that's the conditional statement that we are going to use. Here's a simple example. So for instance, the syntax of the if statement is of course if, and then you define a variable, simple assignment statement. If x equals 0, you also specify a colon. Just like other functions that we've been working with, for example, the definition function, we also specify a colon, or the for function, and so on. So we have to end the if statement with a colon character, just a colon, and the lines after the statement are indented automatically by Python. And if that's not happening, that means we're doing something that is incorrect. Let me in fact demonstrate. So let's click on File to open up our editor by clicking on New File. This brings up the editor window. Let me just resize it so we can see. There we go. So I'm going to start off with a comment. This is a simple if statement, and then define our variable x equals 0, and then of course we begin to test this variable. So I'm going to say if x equals 0, and recall in Python equals is a double equal signs, right? Even though we say in plain language x equals 0, but when you're coding in Python, the operator is double equal signs. So if x equals 0, and of course my colon, that's part of the syntax of the if statement. As soon as I hit enter on the keyboard, Python indents it, and now I can do my simple print, and I can say x is positive. And if I were to run this module, of course I can click on run module to test it. The source must be saved. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to navigate to my Python's folder within my Windows Explorer. Here's my Python folder. And I'm going to say if statement and click save. And Python is going to execute the code and tell me that x is positive. So likewise, I can use any operators to test the simple if condition. And again, the point to be noted once again is the fact that if you were to use just the single equal sign within your if statement, such as here I just changed the double equal to single equal. If x equals 0, print x is positive. If I were to run this just to demonstrate, click on run module, click OK to save, and notice Python is going to give me the invalid syntax because Python does not recognize this single equal sign. So a pretty common mistake that we do when we're writing code in Python. So be careful when you're working with these operators. Okay, so click OK. As soon as I put the double equal sign, which means now I'm testing whether x equals 0 or not. And if it's 0, x is going to be positive and Python is going to print that. Let's do another example. Let's do something like if x equals 6. And I'm going to test if x remainder, and recall our operators, that's the percent sign, 2, and then equals 0, print x is even. Next, I'm going to add something more to it, right? So I'm going to say else, right? So first is going to see if x remainder 2 equals 0, it's going to print even. Otherwise, in other words, else colon, it's the same format, same syntax, just like the if statement. I'm going to say print x is odd. Simple logic. Let's see if we run this. What does Python do for us? Let's click on run module, click OK to save, and notice Python prints that x is even. And the reason why, because x equals 6 and 6 is an even integer. What happens if I change the value? So if I change the value of x from 6 to 7 and then run the module, click on run module, OK to save, and then this time Python prints x is odd. So a very powerful way of testing your conditions by using the if statement. And then of course we added the else as well to complete our logic. So no matter which number you have up here that you specify for the variable x, whether it's 7, 8, 9, 10, as long as it's an even number, Python is going to say it's even. If it's odd, Python is going to say it's an odd number. Let's take a step ahead. Let me move forward. Let me introduce a couple of variables. Instead of just using x as one, I'm going to use two variables. So let's say I'm going to delete this for now. I'm going to say x equals, let's say 6, and then y equals 5. So this time I've defined two variables. And now I'm going to introduce my if statement. So I'm going to test something for these two variables, x and y. So I'm going to say if x equals y colon print x and y are equal. So it's going to say print x and y are equal. I'm going to close the parentheses. And then I can specify my else statement, else colon. Now here I'm going to do something different. Instead of just simply saying if x equals y, print x and y are equal, I'm going to tell Python to incorporate, or I'm going to add another if. In other words, I'm going to nest if within this. Okay, let's see what happens. So I'm going to say else if x is less than y colon. Notice our syntax remains the same and Python keeps indenting it as we nest multiple ifs in our program. So here I'm saying if x is less than y, I'm going to tell Python to print x is less than y. And then I'm going to do else. And notice my indentation, right? It's important that you take a look at how Python is indenting its code. So each block moves in its own specified manner. So here I'm going to say else, and then I'm going to say print x is greater than y. Okay, perfect. So once again, our logic is simple. We introduced two variables, x and y, and we said if x equals y, print x and y are equal. Else, if x is less than y, print x is less than y. Else, print x is greater than y. Let's test it. So let's click on run module, click OK to save, and notice in this instance Python displays the output that x is greater than y. And we can see it from our code here that x is 6 and y is 5. What happens if y is greater than 6? In other words, if I change the value of y to 7 and keep x at 6, let's run the module one more time, click OK, and this time Python says x is less than y. And of course, if they're both equal, for instance, x is 6 and y is also 6, and run this module one more time just to test, click OK, and now Python says x and y are equal. So powerful way of using the if statement. And you can of course not only use the if else, but you can use multiple if statements as well. Let me do one last example. This time I'm going to try to use a real world scenario using the if statement. Okay, now that we have the concept in our minds. So let's get rid of this. And this time I'm going to use a variable called weight. So in fact, I'm creating a program now, right? So the weight equals, instead of defining an integer, because your weight could be 70.5 pounds or 68.6 pounds. In other words, it could be a float number, right? So it doesn't have to be an integer. When you're standing on the weighing or the scale, it displays in decimals as well. So which means in Python it's a float number. So I need to tell Python that the variable weight could be a float number as well. So I'm going to say it's float. And then I'm going to ask the user for an input. Let's say I'm going to say input, and then I'm going to say how many pounds does your suitcase weigh? Close my first parentheses and close my second parentheses. Let me in fact expand this so we can see the entire code. Perfect. So here I've defined a variable called weight equals, it's going to take a float number, and I'm going to prompt the user. Remember the input function that we worked on earlier? So it's input, how many pounds does your suitcase weigh? And the reason why I closed with two parentheses is because I used two parentheses in the beginning. So once I have my input here, for instance, next I can say if weight is, let's say, greater than 50, colon, print, and here I'm going to say, how about there is a $25 charge for luggage that heavy. Of course, make sure our spellings are correct. So if the weight is above 50, greater than 50 pounds, print there is a $25 charge for luggage that heavy. And let's do another print. So I'm also going to tell the user that thank you for your business, because we want to be polite, right? So if they're going to pay extra $25 to us, we need to be polite. So thank you for your business. Next, I'm going to say else, right? So if, for instance, the weight is less than 50, right? So what needs to be done? So else, colon, simply do a print. So here, all I'm saying is, so far, if the weight is greater than 50 pounds, there's a $25 charge for the luggage that heavy, and thank you for your business. Else, in other words, if it's less than 50, then what should I tell the user? Then I'm going to say, have a safe journey. Perfect. So you get the idea, right? Using the if statement in a real world scenario. So if I run this, for instance, module, click on run module, click OK to save. And what Python does, it asks a question or prompts the user for input. How many pounds does your suitcase weigh? So here if I say it's, let's say, 70 pounds, hit the enter key, and Python says there is a $25 charge for luggage that heavy, and thank you for your business. If I run this module again, click OK to run it, and how many pounds does your suitcase weigh? If it's less than 50, for instance, it's 45, Python says have a safe journey. So a powerful way of using the if statement, the else statement, and of course, we can nest multiple if statements within our program. So I hope the concept is clear. Practice with the if statement. You can, of course, use the if statement in your definition functions, and depending upon your logic, it can extend to creating an extended code as well. But the syntax, the concept stays the same. You can use a simple if statement, or you can use multiple if statements. So practice, and let's move to our next lesson.